When schoolteacher Maeve Harper found 6-year-old Rosie Strickland crying alone in the darkening schoolhouse, she had no idea that one act of kindness would ignite a firestorm that would threaten everything she'd built in Red Creek, Arizona. The child's father, the wealthiest, most untouchable rancher in the territory, would become both her salvation and her damnation. The town's most powerful woman would orchestrate her destruction, and a little girl's broken heart would force an entire community to choose between cruelty and conscience. Before we begin, please hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far Maeve's story travels. Now, let's step back to 1887, where everything started on one cold October evening. The October wind rattled the windows of Red Creek's one-room schoolhouse as Maeve Harper swept chalk dust from the floorboards. Her fingers were stiff with cold. The potbelly stove had burned down to embers an hour ago, and firewood cost money she didn't have. The hem of her navy dress, carefully mended in 3 places, brushed against the worn planks as she worked. 26 years old, broke, and 3 months behind on rent for the tiny room she kept above the mercantile. But the children didn't know that. They didn't see the watered-down soup she ate for dinner or the way she wore the same 2 dresses in rotation, turning the collars when they frayed. They saw Miss Harper, who made arithmetic into games and read adventure stories with different voices for every character. She'd come to Arizona Territory 2 years ago with nothing but a teaching certificate from a Boston normal school and a desperate need to disappear from a life that had stopped fitting. Red Creek had needed a teacher. She'd needed a purpose. The match had seemed providential, until the loneliness settled in like dust. Maeve set the broom aside and turned to gather her few belongings, a worn leather satchel, a shawl with pulled threads, the novel she was reading by candlelight to save on lamp oil. That's when she heard it. A small, hitching sound from the corner near the bookshelf. She froze, listening. There it was again. The unmistakable sound of a child trying not to cry. "Hello?" Maeve crossed the room quickly, her heart suddenly racing. "Is someone here?" Behind the bookshelf, wedged into the narrow space between wood and wall, sat Rosie Strickland. 6 years old, with tangled blonde curls and enormous blue eyes brimming with tears. Her pinafore was twisted, one knee was scraped and bleeding, and she was shaking, whether from cold or fear, Maeve couldn't tell. "Oh, sweetheart." Maeve knelt immediately, careful not to move too fast. "What are you doing here? School ended hours ago." Rosie's lower lip trembled. She clutched a small slate to her chest like a shield. I was practicing my letters," she whispered. "I wanted to make them perfect like you showed us. But then everyone left and it got dark and I was scared to walk home alone and—" The words tumbled out in a rush before dissolving into quiet sobs. Maeve's chest tightened. Every child in Red Creek knew the Strickland name. Caleb Strickland owned half the rangeland in the territory, ran 2,000 head of cattle, and had a reputation for being as hard as the desert stone. His daughter came to school in dresses that cost more than Maeve earned in a month, always clean, always pressed. But the little girl barely spoke, sat alone during lunch, and flinched when anyone raised their voice. "You're not in trouble," Maeve said gently. She reached out slowly, letting Rosie decide whether to accept the touch. "But you must be freezing. Come here." Rosie hesitated, then crawled out of her hiding spot and straight into Maeve's arms. The child was indeed cold, her hands like ice, her whole body trembling. Maeve wrapped her own shawl around the small shoulders and guided her toward the stove. "Let's get some warmth back in you." She coaxed the embers back to life with the last precious pieces of kindling, then set her small kettle on top. Tea. She had tea. Cheap, bitter stuff, but she could add a precious spoonful of honey, a gift from Mrs. Chen at the restaurant, payment for tutoring her son in English. While the water heated, Maeve dampened her handkerchief and carefully cleaned the scrape on Rosie's knee. The little girl watched her with those huge, solemn eyes. "Does it hurt very much?" Maeve asked. Rosie shook her head. Then, so quietly Maeve almost missed it, "I'm used to hurts." Something in those words sent a chill through Maeve that had nothing to do with the cold. She'd seen bruises on children before, back in Boston. She'd reported them, been ignored, learned that money and influence mattered more than a teacher's concerns. But Rosie's scrape was clearly from a fall, and there were no other marks on her arms or legs, just sadness, the kind that lived deep. "Where's your father?" Maeve asked as she prepared the tea. He must be worried sick. Papa's always working. Rosie's voice was matter of fact. He doesn't finish until dark. Mrs. Halloway was supposed to pick me up, but she forgot again. She forgets lots of times. Mrs. Halloway, the housekeeper Caleb Strickland employed to mind his daughter after school, clearly not doing her job. Maeve's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice soft. Well, you're safe now. Here, careful, it's hot. She'd sweetened the tea with nearly all her remaining honey and cooled it with a splash from the water bucket. Rosie wrapped both small hands around the tin cup and sipped carefully. Some color returned to her cheeks. Miss Harper? Rosie's voice was very small. Do you think, would it be all right if I stayed here, just until Papa comes? I don't want to be alone in the big house. The big house. The Strickland Ranch house, a sprawling structure visible from town, built by Caleb's father and expanded after he'd married. Everyone said it was a mansion by territory standards. Everyone also said it had been empty of joy since Rosie's mother died 3 years ago. Of course you can stay. Maeve settled beside her, close enough to share warmth. Would you like me to read to you? Rosie's face transformed. Really? Really. Maeve retrieved her own book, a battered copy of Little Women, and began to read aloud. She'd made it through 2 chapters when Rosie's head began to droop. The child fought it for a few minutes, then gave up and leaned against Maeve's shoulder. Within moments, she was asleep. Maeve sat very still, feeling the small, warm weight against her side. When was the last time someone had needed her like this? Not for conjugating verbs or solving arithmetic, but just for comfort, for being there. The wind picked up outside, howling around the corners of the building. Through the window, Maeve could see the sky darkening to bruised purple. A storm rolling in, the kind that turned roads to mud and made the desert flash flood without warning. She should walk to the Strickland Ranch, should return this child to her father. But Rosie was finally peaceful, finally warm, and Maeve couldn't bring herself to wake her. Besides, surely Caleb Strickland would come looking for his daughter soon. The minutes stretched into an hour. The wind became a roar. The first drops of rain struck the windows like thrown gravel. Maeve was just considering whether she'd need to carry Rosie through the storm when the schoolhouse door exploded open. A man filled the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, soaked through by rain that had turned into a deluge. Water dripped from the brim of his black hat and ran in rivulets down a canvas duster that had seen hard use. He swept the room with eyes that were storm gray and absolutely furious. "Where is she?" His voice was rough, edged with something that might have been panic if it hadn't been wrapped in so much anger. "Where's my daughter?" Maeve's heart kicked against her ribs. "Mr. Strickland!" His gaze found Rosie, still asleep against Maeve's shoulder, and something shifted in his expression. The fury didn't disappear, but it fractured, revealing something raw underneath. "I've been searching for 2 hours." He crossed the room in 3 strides, water pooling on the floorboards with each step. Mrs. Halloway said she'd picked her up. When I got home and found she was lying, he stopped, jaw working. "She was hiding," Maeve said quietly, careful not to wake the sleeping child. She'd stayed late practicing her letters and was afraid to walk home alone when it got dark. I made her tea and read to her. She only fell asleep a little while ago. Caleb Strickland stared at his daughter. Up close, Maeve could see he was younger than she'd thought, perhaps 35, though hard living had carved lines around his eyes and mouth. His face was all sharp angles, bronzed by sun and wind, with a jaw that looked like it had been chiseled from granite, handsome in a severe way. But it was his eyes that caught her, gray as winter sky, currently fixed on Rosie with an expression of such naked anguish that Maeve had to look away. "I should have checked," he said, more to himself than to her. "Should have gone to the school myself instead of trusting—" He bit off the words. "She's fine," Maeve said. "Just scared and cold. But fine now." He reached down and his hands, large, work-scarred, surprisingly gentle, carefully gathered his daughter into his arms. Rosie stirred, murmured something, then settled against his chest without waking. For a long moment, Caleb just held her, eyes closed, jaw tight. His whole body seemed to be trembling, though whether from cold or emotion, Maeve couldn't tell. When he opened his eyes again, they locked on Maeve. "Thank you," The words came out rough, rusty, like he didn't use them often. For staying with her, for... He glanced at the empty cup, the shawl still wrapped around Rosie's shoulders. You didn't have to do that. Of course I did. Maeve stood, smoothing her skirt. She's my student, and she was frightened. Nevertheless, he shifted Rosie's weight, reaching into his pocket. What do I owe you for your time? The words hit like a slap. Maeve felt her spine stiffen. Nothing. You owe me nothing. His eyebrows drew together. I'm not a charity case, Miss Harper. Neither am I, Mr. Strickland. She met his gaze levelly. I didn't stay with your daughter for money. I stayed because no child should be alone and afraid if I can prevent it. Something flickered in those gray eyes. Surprise, perhaps? Or suspicion. The town's wealthiest man probably didn't meet many people who wouldn't take his money. I see. He studied her for another moment, then gave a curt nod. Then I'm in your debt. You're not in my debt either. You're just a father whose child needed help. Maeve moved to the door, opening it against the driving rain. But you might want to have a conversation with Mrs. Halloway about her responsibilities. Mrs. Halloway no longer works for me. His voice was flat, final, as of approximately 2 hours ago. He carried Rosie to the door, then paused. Rain hammered the awning overhead, turning the street beyond into a river of mud. You're walking home? He asked. I live above the Mercantile. It's not far. It's a storm. He looked at the deluge, then back at her. You'll be soaked through. I'll dry. Stubborn. But there was something almost like approval in his tone. At least take this. He shrugged out of his duster, not easy while holding Rosie, and held it out. You'll get wet. I'm already wet, and I have a horse. You don't. When she hesitated, he added, Please. That last word, rough but genuine, decided her. Maeve took the duster. It was heavy, warm from his body heat, and smelled of leather and sage and rain. She draped it over her shoulders. Thank you. He nodded once, then carried his daughter out into the storm. Maeve watched from the doorway as he mounted a massive black horse, moving with surprising grace despite his burden, and rode away into the darkness. The last she saw was Rosie's blonde hair against her father's shoulder, protected from the rain by his arms. She closed the door and looked down at the duster still draped over her shoulders. She should probably return it tomorrow. Should walk to the ranch, hand it to a housekeeper or stable hand, and never think about those storm-gray eyes again. Should. But as she locked up the schoolhouse and walked home through the rain, staying much drier than she would have otherwise, Maeve found herself thinking about the way Caleb Strickland had held his daughter. The barely contained panic in his voice, the raw anguish in his eyes when he'd looked at her sleeping face. Not cruel, not uncaring, just broken. And Rosie. Sweet, lonely Rosie, who hid behind bookshelves and apologized for existing and said she was used to hurts. Maeve climbed the narrow stairs to her room, hung the duster on a peg to dry, and stared at it for a long time in the candlelight. She had a feeling she'd just stepped into something much bigger than a forgotten child, and an evening of unexpected kindness. She was right. But 3 days later, Maeve was teaching multiplication tables when the schoolhouse door opened and Caleb Strickland walked in. Every child in the room went silent. The parents of Red Creek talked, gossiped, really, and the children heard everything. They knew the Stricklands, knew the money, knew the power, and they knew the tragedy. Mr. Strickland. Maeve set down her chalk, very aware that every pair of young eyes was watching. Can I help you? I came to return this. He held out her shawl, the one she'd wrapped around Rosie, which she'd completely forgotten. And to retrieve my duster. Of course. Children, please continue working on the problems on the board. I'll be just a moment. She stepped outside with him. The late October sun was warm despite the lingering chill in the air. The Strickland ranch wagon stood nearby, driven by a weathered man who was diplomatically not watching them. Your shawl. Caleb handed it over. It had been washed and carefully folded. And I wanted to apologize for the other night. I was upset. You were worried about your daughter. That's nothing to apologize for. Still, he glanced toward the schoolhouse door where Rosie's blonde head was visible through the window. She hasn't stopped talking about you. Says you're the nicest person in Red Creek. Something warm unfurled in Maeve's chest. She's a lovely child, very bright. Yes. A pause. Lonely. The admission seemed to cost him something. Maeve waited. I know she struggles, Caleb continued, his voice lower now. Doesn't make friends easily. She's been different since her mother died. More withdrawn. That's understandable. Grief affects children deeply. You sound like you know something about it. Maeve met his gaze. I do. She didn't elaborate, and he didn't push. They stood in the warm October sunlight, two people carrying losses they didn't speak about. I need to hire someone new, Caleb said finally, to look after Rosie after school. But she won't hear of it. Says she wants to stay with you. She can. The words came out before Maeve had fully thought them through. If you're comfortable with that. I usually stay until 4 or so anyway, grading papers and preparing lessons. She could do her homework, read, help me tidy up. Caleb studied her. I'd pay you. I don't need Miss Harper. His voice was firm but not unkind. You'd be caring for my child for 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's work. I pay for work. Maeve's pride warred with her empty cupboards, pride lost. All right, but the standard rate. Nothing more. The standard rate, he agreed. Then, after a moment, she talks about you at dinner, says you make learning feel like magic. She makes teaching feel like magic, Maeve said honestly. She has a gift with words, the way she describes things. There's poetry in it. Something shifted in Caleb's expression. For just a moment, the hard edges softened. Her mother was like that. Could describe a sunset so beautifully, you'd swear you were seeing it for the first time. Past tense. Always past tense. Maeve's heart ached for both of them. Rosie has her gift, she said quietly. Caleb nodded once, then seemed to remember himself. The walls went back up. I'll send her with lunch, and I'll pick her up at 4, if that's acceptable. Very acceptable. Good. He turned to go, then paused. Thank you, Miss Harper. For the other night. And for this. Maeve, she found herself saying, if we're going to be seeing each other regularly, you might as well call me Maeve. He looked surprised. Then, slowly, something that might have been the beginning of a smile touched his mouth, gone so quickly she almost missed it. Caleb, he said, then climbed into the wagon and drove away. Maeve stood in the sunlight, holding her laundered shawl and watching the dust settle in the street. She had no idea what she'd just agreed to. But as she turned back to the schoolhouse, where Rosie was watching through the window with an expression of pure joy, she thought maybe it would be all right. Maybe it would even be good. The arrangement began simply enough. Every afternoon at 2 o'clock, when the other children were collected by parents or walked home in chattering groups, Rosie would settle at Maeve's desk with her slate and reader. Sometimes she practiced her letters. Sometimes she drew pictures, horses mostly, but also flowers and birds and the mountains that ringed the valley. Sometimes she just read, curled in the corner with whatever book caught her fancy. Maeve worked around her, grading papers and planning lessons. Occasionally she'd ask Rosie's opinion on a story she was considering for the class, or whether a particular math problem was too easy or too hard. The little girl took these consultations very seriously, offering thoughtful analysis that often made Maeve smile. It was peaceful, easy, the kind of quiet companionship that felt, after weeks of loneliness, like water in the desert. At 4 o'clock precisely, Caleb would arrive in the wagon. The first few times, he simply collected Rosie with a brief nod to Maeve. But gradually, the exchanges grew longer. He'd ask about his daughter's progress. Maeve would share small victories, a difficult word mastered, a particularly beautiful drawing, a kindness shown to another student. Caleb listened. Really listened. His attention was absolute, focused, and Maeve found herself speaking more freely than she intended. About teaching, about the challenges of managing 23 children of varying ages in one room, about her dream of building a proper library where students could borrow books. There's no library in Red Creek, he observed one afternoon. No, the nearest one is in Tucson, 2 days' ride. Most of these children will never see the inside of a real library. She'd said too much. I'm sorry, I'm lecturing. You're passionate, that's different. He studied her. If you had unlimited funds, what would you do with this schoolhouse? The question surprised her. More books, better slates, chalk that doesn't crumble after one use, curtains for the windows, it gets brutally hot in summer, proper desks instead of these ancient benches, a world map, science equipment, art supplies. She stopped, laughing at herself. I'm making quite a list, aren't I? Ambition isn't a flaw, Miss Maeve. The sound of her name in his rough voice did something strange to her pulse. She blamed it on the afternoon heat. Papa! Rosie came running out, her pinafore dusty from drawing on the floor. Look what I made! She thrust a piece of paper at her father. On it was a drawing, crude but recognizable, of 3 figures, a tall man, a small girl, and a woman in a long dress, all standing in front of a building labeled School. Caleb stared at it. Something complicated moved across his face. It's you and me and Miss Harper, Rosie explained unnecessarily. Because we're all together every day now. It's like we're a... She paused, searching for the word. A set. Like the tea set Mama had. All the pieces match. The silence that followed was weighted. Maeve felt heat rise in her cheeks. She should say something, should gently correct the child's innocent assumption. We do spend a lot of time together, Caleb said finally. His voice was careful. But Miss Harper is your teacher, Rosie, not... I know. Rosie's face fell slightly. But I can pretend, can't I? Caleb looked at Maeve. Their eyes met over his daughter's head, and in that moment she saw everything, the loneliness, the guilt, the fierce protectiveness, and underneath it all the faintest flicker of something else, something that made her breath catch. You can pretend, he said softly. Then to Maeve, we should go. Let you close up. But he folded the drawing very carefully and tucked it into his pocket. As they drove away, Maeve stood in the dusty street and realized she was in dangerous territory. She'd started to care, not just about Rosie, though the child had utterly claimed her heart, but about the serious, grief-haunted man who looked at his daughter like she was the only good thing left in his world, about the way his rare smiles transformed his face, about the respect with which he listened to her opinions, about the small considerations, like the way he'd started arriving 5 minutes early so she could leave before full dark, or how he'd quietly arranged for firewood to be delivered to the schoolhouse without telling her. She'd started to care, and that was foolish. Dangerous. Caleb Strickland was the wealthiest man in the territory. She was a broke schoolteacher living above a store, and the town was watching. Vera Blackwell noticed first. She noticed everything. It was her particular talent, honed over 47 years of social climbing and strategic positioning. As the wife of the territorial judge and the self-appointed queen of Red Creek society, she'd built her influence on knowing everyone's business and deciding what it meant. So when Caleb Strickland started arriving at the schoolhouse every afternoon at 4 o'clock, when he lingered talking to the schoolteacher, when his daughter started drawing pictures that included said schoolteacher in obvious familial arrangements, Vera noticed, and she did not approve. It's unseemly, she announced at the Ladies' Aid Society meeting held in her ostentatiously decorated parlor. The man is still in mourning. It's been 3 years, Mrs. Chen ventured cautiously. 3 years is nothing. Vera's tone suggested the subject was closed. Poor Caroline deserves more respect than to be replaced by some Boston transplant barely scraping by. She's an excellent teacher, Mrs. Patterson said. My Tommy's reading has improved remarkably. I'm sure she's very dedicated. Vera's smile was sharp. But dedication can cross lines, can it? Especially when there's wealth involved. The implication hung in the air like smoke. You're not suggesting, Mrs. Chen began. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm simply observing that an impoverished young woman spending excessive time with a wealthy widower and his motherless child creates optics. People will talk. People would talk because Vera would make certain they talked. That was how this worked. And talk they did. Within a week, the whispers had started. By the second week, they'd grown teeth. Did you see how she looks at him? Poor little Rosie, being used as bait. I heard she's positioning herself to become the second Mrs. Strickland. Gold digger. Scheming. Inappropriate. Maeve felt the change like a physical chill. Parents who'd smiled at her now nodded curtly. Mothers who'd sought her advice on their children's progress suddenly found reasons to avoid conversation. The warm welcome she'd felt when first arriving in Red Creek had curdled into something else, something cold. She tried to ignore it, tried to focus on her students and her work. But the isolation was crushing. She'd already been alone in Red Creek. Now she was alone and under suspicion. Caleb noticed something was wrong when he arrived one afternoon to find Maeve white-faced, methodically cleaning already clean chalkboards while Rosie watched with worried eyes. "What happened?" he asked. "Nothing." Maeve didn't turn around. "Just a long day." "Maeve," Mrs. Thompson withdrew her 3 children from school. The words came out flat. Said she didn't feel comfortable with the moral climate of the classroom. 2 other families are considering the same. Caleb's expression went hard. "Because of me." It wasn't a question. He knew. Of course he knew. He'd lived in Red Creek all his life, understood its dynamics, its hierarchies. He knew exactly what was happening. "It's not your fault," Maeve said quietly. "It absolutely is my fault." He turned to Rosie. "Sweetheart, would you wait in the wagon? I need to speak with Miss Harper alone." Rosie looked between them with worried eyes, but obeyed. When she was gone, Caleb turned back to Maeve. "This needs to stop." "I know." Maeve finally met his gaze, and he could see the defeat in her eyes. "I think maybe the afternoon arrangement should end, for Rosie's sake as much as mine." "That's not what I meant." Caleb crossed the room in 2 strides. "I meant the gossip needs to stop. The cruelty. You've done nothing wrong." "It doesn't matter." Maeve's laugh was brittle. "Wrong or right doesn't matter when reputation is involved. You should know that." "I do know that." His voice was rough. "I know exactly what this town can do to someone, but I won't let them do it to you. You can't stop them." She looked at him with something like pity. "You're powerful, yes, wealthy, but Vera Blackwell has been running Red Creek Society for 20 years. If she's decided I'm a threat, then she's wrong." Caleb's hands clenched into fists. "Damn it, Maeve, you're the best thing that's happened to Rosie since—" He stopped, took a breath. "Since her mother died. She smiles now. Did you know that? She smiles and laughs and talks about her day. She has hope again, and I—" He cut himself off, but it was too late. The words hung between them, half-spoken but fully understood. Maeve's heart was thundering. "Caleb, I know this is complicated," he said. "I know there are problems, social expectations, financial disparities, the whole damn town watching, but I don't care." He met her eyes, and his gaze was fierce. "I haven't cared about anything except survival and Rosie for 3 years. And then you showed up with your ridiculous optimism and your passion for teaching and your kindness to a lonely little girl, and suddenly I'm—" He stopped again, closed his eyes. "Suddenly, I'm remembering what it feels like to be alive," he finished quietly. Maeve couldn't breathe. The small schoolhouse seemed to have shrunk, the air too thick, too warm. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't lose this position. Teaching is all I have." "I know." Caleb's expression was anguished. "And I won't ask you to risk it, but I need you to know this matters. You matter." Before she could respond, before she could process what he was saying, he turned and walked out. Maeve stood alone in the schoolhouse, her hands shaking, her heart in chaos. Everything was about to get much worse. She just didn't know it yet. The next morning, Maeve walked to school through streets that felt hostile. Women she'd greeted for 2 years now turned their backs. Men tipped their hats, but their eyes were cold, assessing. By the time she reached the schoolhouse, her hands were trembling. 12 children sat in their usual seats, 12 out of 23. Maeve set down her satchel with careful precision, refusing to let them see her shake. "Good morning, class." "Good morning, Miss Harper," they chorused, but their voices were uncertain. Even at 6 and 7 and 10 years old, they felt the change in the air. She taught multiplication and geography and spelling as though nothing was wrong, as though half her students hadn't been withdrawn overnight, as though she couldn't see the empty desks where the Thompson children had sat, where the Morrison boys had shared a reader, where little Sarah Chen had practiced her letters with fierce concentration. Rosie sat in the front row, watching Maeve with eyes too old for 6. When the other children went outside for recess, she stayed behind. "Miss Harper?" Her voice was small. "Is it my fault people are being mean to you?" Maeve's heart cracked. She knelt beside the child's desk. "Oh, sweetheart, no, this is not your fault. Not even a little bit." "But they're saying—" Rosie's eyes filled with tears. "I heard Mrs. Patterson talking to Mama Chen. She said you were trying to catch Papa like he was a fish. But that's not true. You're just nice to me. You're nice to everyone." "Some people don't understand kindness," Maeve said gently. "They think everyone has hidden reasons for the things they do." "Do you?" Rosie asked. "Have hidden reasons?" Maeve looked into those blue eyes, so much like her father's, so full of need and hope and fear, and knew she couldn't lie. Not completely. "I care about you," she said carefully. "That's not hidden, and it's not a trick. You're a wonderful student and a kind person, and I'm grateful to know you. And Papa?" The question hung between them, delicate as spun glass. "Your father is a good man," Maeve said, "and he loves you very much." It wasn't an answer, not really, but it was all she could give. At 4 o'clock, when Caleb arrived, Maeve met him outside. The afternoon sun was sharp, casting long shadows across the dusty street. She could see Vera Blackwell watching from the mercantile across the way, her expression avid with interest. "We need to talk," Maeve said quietly. Caleb's jaw tightened. "I know, not here." He glanced at the watching windows, the faces barely concealed behind curtains. "Come to dinner tomorrow night. We'll discuss this properly." "Caleb, that's the last thing we should—" "Please." The word was rough. "I can't. This needs to be said somewhere private, somewhere I don't have to watch every word because the whole damn town is listening." Maeve knew it was a mistake, knew she was stepping off a cliff, but something in his voice, the barely controlled desperation, made her nod. "Tomorrow," she agreed. "After school." Vera Blackwell's smile, when Maeve glanced toward the mercantile, was sharp as a knife. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Maeve taught her dwindling class. 2 more families had withdrawn their children, leaving her with just 10 students. The school board would have to take notice soon. Below 15 students, they could legally close the school, terminate her contract, leave her with nothing. She tried not to think about it, tried to focus on the children who remained, who still looked at her with trust and affection. But fear was a constant companion now, cold and heavy in her chest. When 4 o'clock came, Caleb was waiting. Rosie climbed into the wagon between them, chattering about a story Maeve had read, and the 3 of them drove out of town toward the Strickland Ranch. Maeve had never been to the ranch before. She'd seen it from a distance, a sprawling house of adobe and wood, built to withstand the brutal summers and bitter winters of the territory. Up close, it was even more impressive. 2 stories with a wide veranda wrapped around 3 sides, corrals and outbuildings arranged in careful order. Everything spoke of wealth, yes, but also of careful stewardship. This was a working ranch, not a showpiece. "It's beautiful," Maeve said as Caleb helped her down from the wagon. "It was my father's dream," Caleb replied. "He came out here in '58 with nothing but determination and stubbornness. Built this place from scratch." He looked at the house with something complicated in his eyes. "Then I married Caroline and filled it with life. After she died, it became a mausoleum." Rosie had run ahead to greet the ranch hands. Caleb watched her go, then turned to Maeve. "I should warn you," he said. "I'm not good at this, talking, opening up. Caroline used to say I kept everything locked so tight it was a wonder I didn't explode." "You don't have to—" "I do." His gaze was steady. "Because you deserve the truth, about what people are saying, about why I'm risking your reputation by asking you here, about everything." Inside, the house was exactly as she'd imagined, spacious but somehow empty, beautifully furnished but untouched by warmth, as if whoever had lived here had simply stopped halfway through the process of making it home. Caleb led her to a dining room dominated by a massive oak table. Places had been set for 3, the china delicate and obviously expensive. Through the doorway, Maeve could see an older Mexican woman, the cook she assumed, working at a massive stove. Maria's been with the family since I was 10, Caleb said, following her gaze. She's the only reason Rosie and I haven't starved these past 3 years. Rosie appeared, freshly washed, and climbed into her seat with the enthusiasm of a child who rarely had dinner guests. Maria served them, beef stew rich with vegetables, fresh bread still warm from the oven, apple pie for dessert. It was a feast compared to the thin soups Maeve had been living on. They ate and talked, and for a little while Maeve could almost pretend this was normal. Just a family dinner, just a simple evening. Rosie told elaborate stories about her day, acting out different parts with dramatic flair. Caleb watched his daughter with naked love, occasionally glancing at Maeve with something she couldn't quite name. When Rosie finally yawned, fighting it, not wanting the evening to end, Caleb sent her upstairs with instructions to put on her nightgown and brush her teeth. The little girl hugged Maeve tightly before she left. "Don't go away," Rosie whispered. "Please don't go away like Mama did." Maeve's throat closed. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart." It was a promise she didn't know if she could keep. When Rosie's footsteps had faded up the stairs, Caleb poured coffee, real coffee, not the chicory substitute Maeve had been drinking, and led her out to the veranda. The sun was setting, painting the mountains gold and crimson. The air smelled of sage and horses and coming autumn. "This is where Caroline and I used to sit," Caleb said, "every evening after Rosie went to bed. We'd talk about our day, make plans for the future. She'd tell me about the book she was reading or the dress she was sewing." He paused. "I haven't sat here since she died." Maeve waited. She'd learned that Caleb needed time to gather his words, to push past whatever walls he'd built around his heart. "She died in childbirth," he said finally. "A son. He didn't survive either. The doctor said there were complications, that even if we'd been in San Francisco with the best medical care, it might not have mattered. But all I could think was that I'd killed her, that I'd been selfish, wanting more children, and it had cost me everything. Caleb, Rosie was 3, old enough to know her mother was gone, young enough not to fully understand death. She kept asking when Mama was coming home, kept setting a place for her at the table. It took months before she stopped." His voice was raw. "I shut down, threw myself into the ranch, into work, into anything that would keep me from feeling. Hired Mrs. Halloway to manage Rosie because I couldn't bear to look at my daughter without seeing my wife's eyes staring back at me." Maeve's chest ached. "That's grief. That's normal." "Maybe, but it was also cowardice." He turned to face her. "I've been a ghost for 3 years, Maeve, going through the motions of living without actually being alive. And then you—" He stopped, shook his head. "You stayed late with a frightened child. Such a small thing. But it cracked something open in me, made me realize what I'd been doing to Rosie. How much she needed someone who would just be present with her." "You're present now," Maeve said softly. "Because of you. Because watching you with her reminded me what being a father is supposed to look like." He moved closer. "And then I kept coming back. And it wasn't just for Rosie anymore. It was because I wanted to hear your voice. Wanted to see you smile. Wanted—" He cut himself off, but his eyes said everything his words didn't. "This is dangerous," Maeve whispered, "for both of us." "I know, believe me. I know." Caleb's laugh was bitter. "I've been telling myself for weeks that I need to stop, that I'm putting you at risk, that the town will tear you apart, that I have no right to drag you into my mess of a life. But then I see you, and all those good intentions disappear." Maeve's heart was racing. "Caleb, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I know I have nothing to offer you but complications and scandal and a grief-haunted house. But I needed you to know that this matters, that you're not just Rosie's teacher, that when I think about the future now, for the first time in 3 years, I can see something besides emptiness." The words hung between them, raw and true and terrifying. "I care about you," Maeve said, the admission torn from somewhere deep. "About both of you. More than I should. More than is wise." "Maeve, but I can't lose my position." The words came out harsh. "Teaching is all I have. It's all I am. Without it, I'm nothing. I have no family, no money, no prospects. If the school board terminates my contract because of scandal, I'll have to leave Red Creek, leave Arizona. Start over somewhere else, if anywhere will even hire me. Caleb's expression was anguished. I won't let that happen. You can't stop it. You're powerful, but Vera Blackwell is a bitter woman who derives pleasure from destroying anything beautiful. His voice was hard. I know exactly what she is. I've known her since I was a child. She tried to push Caroline out of society too, said a girl from a poor mining family wasn't suitable for a Strickland. Caroline won her over eventually through sheer force of personality, but Vera never forgot being challenged. And now she's decided I'm a threat. Yes, Caleb's hands clenched, which is why I'm going to... Papa? Rosie's voice drifted from upstairs. I'm ready for my story. Caleb closed his eyes. I should go, Maeve said gently. She's waiting. He hesitated, then nodded. Will you stay? Just until I come back down? She should say no. Should leave now, while she still could. But she nodded. Caleb disappeared upstairs. Maeve stood on the veranda, watching the last light fade from the sky, and tried to sort through the chaos in her heart. She cared about Caleb Strickland. More than cared. The admission terrified her. She'd come to Red Creek to escape one disaster, a broken engagement to a Boston banker who'd decided at the last moment that he wanted a wife with connections, not convictions. She'd thought herself immune to romantic entanglement after that, thought she'd learned her lesson about trusting men with power. But Caleb wasn't like James. James had been all charm and empty promises. Caleb was grief and honesty and awkward vulnerability. He didn't make flowery speeches or sweep her off her feet. He just showed up, listened, cared. And Rosie. God, Rosie. The child had crawled into Maeve's heart and made a home there. The thought of never seeing her again was physically painful, but staying meant risking everything. Footsteps on the stairs. Caleb returned, his expression slightly softer. She's asleep. Asked me to thank you for coming to dinner. She's precious. She is. He moved to stand beside her, close but not touching. Maeve, I know this is impossible. I know the timing is terrible and the circumstances are worse, but I can't. He stopped, searching for words. I can't pretend I don't feel this. Whatever this is. Maeve turned to face him. In the fading light, his features were softened, younger. She could see the man he might have been before grief carved itself into his bones. What are you asking? She whispered. I don't know. His laugh was helpless. Permission to care about you, permission to imagine a future that isn't empty. I'm not good at this. Caroline was the one who knew how to talk about feelings. I'm just a rancher who's forgotten how to be human. You're human, Maeve said. Painfully human. They stood there, inches apart, the night settling around them. Maeve knew she should step back, should maintain distance, should be sensible. Instead, she found herself reaching out, touching his hand. His fingers closed around hers immediately. Warm, calloused, steady. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I. If this goes wrong, I won't let it go wrong. His voice was fierce. I won't let them destroy you, Maeve. I swear it. It was a promise he couldn't keep. But standing there in the darkness, his hand solid in hers, she almost believed him. They stayed like that for a long moment, not speaking, just holding on. Then Maeve gently pulled away. I should go, it's getting late. Caleb nodded, but his expression was reluctant. I'll drive you. That will just make things worse. People will talk. Let them talk. But he saw her expression and relented. I'll have Miguel drive you. One of the ranch hands. No one will think twice about it. It was a compromise. Maeve accepted it. Miguel was a quiet man in his 40s who asked no questions and made no assumptions. He drove her back to town in comfortable silence, dropping her at the Mercantile just as the last businesses were closing for the night. Maeve climbed the stairs to her room, lit a candle, and sat on her narrow bed. Her hand still felt warm where Caleb had held it. She was in so much trouble. The next day brought catastrophe. Maeve arrived at school to find only 8 children waiting. The Morrison family had withdrawn. The Pattersons. Even Mrs. Chen, sweet, kind Mrs. Chen, who'd given Maeve honey and helped with translation, had pulled her son from class with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, she'd whispered. My husband says we can't afford to be associated with scandal. His restaurant, people are threatening to stop coming. I'm so sorry. Maeve had nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. 8 children. She needed 15 to keep the school open. At noon, the school board secretary arrived with a letter. Maeve opened it with shaking hands. Due to declining enrollment and concerns raised by multiple families regarding moral character and inappropriate conduct, your contract will be reviewed at an emergency board meeting on Friday, November 11th. Your attendance is required. Further enrollment decline may result in immediate termination. 3 days. She had 3 days before they decided her fate. That afternoon, when Caleb arrived, Maeve handed him the letter without a word. She watched his face darken as he read, watched his knuckles go white around the paper. They can't do this, he said flatly. They can. They are. Maeve's voice was hollow. And they're right to. 8 students isn't enough to justify keeping the school open. The students left because of gossip, not because of you. The reason doesn't matter. Like hell it doesn't. Caleb looked at her and his expression was fierce. I'm going to fix this. Caleb, I'm going to the school board tonight. I'm going to tell them exactly what happened. That you stayed late with a frightened child. That I hired you to look after Rosie because she's happier with you than she's been in 3 years. That there's been nothing inappropriate about any of it. They won't listen, Maeve said tiredly. Vera Blackwell is on the school board. She's already made up her mind. Then I'll make her change it. You can't fight the whole town for me. Watch me. He handed the letter back. Friday. I'll be at that meeting, and I'll make them see reason. He left, taking Rosie with him, and Maeve sat alone in the empty schoolhouse. Through the window, she could see people going about their evening business. Normal people, living normal lives, untouched by scandal. She'd thought Red Creek could be home. She'd been wrong. That night, unable to sleep, Maeve stood at her window and looked out over the town. Lights glowed in windows. Smoke rose from chimneys. Somewhere, a dog barked. Life continuing, indifferent to her crisis. She thought about Caleb's promise, I'll make them see reason, and wanted to believe him. But she'd learned young that wanting something didn't make it true. She'd lost her engagement because she'd spoken out against her fiancé's business practices. Lost her place in Boston society because she'd refused to be silent. And now she was losing her position, her home, her purpose. All because she'd shown kindness to a lonely child and allowed herself to care about a grieving man. The pattern was clear. Maeve Harper was very good at losing things. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass and let herself, finally, cry. Friday came too quickly, and not quickly enough. Maeve taught her 8 remaining students with the desperate focus of someone trying to memorize something before it was taken away. She made them laugh with a silly rhyme about state capitals. She praised Tommy's improving penmanship and Sarah's beautiful drawing. She read them a story about pioneers crossing the plains, and when she got to the part where they finally saw the Pacific Ocean, her voice only cracked a little. At 3 o'clock, she dismissed them. At 4, Caleb arrived. Not for Rosie, who'd stayed home today, but for her. Ready? He asked. No, but she gathered her shawl and followed him anyway. The school board meeting was held in the town hall, a modest building that served multiple purposes. When Maeve and Caleb walked in, the 5 board members were already seated at a long table. Vera Blackwell sat in the center, perfectly coiffed, her expression pleasant and utterly merciless. The other members, Judge Blackwell, Vera's husband, Marcus Sullivan, who owned the bank, Robert Patterson, whose children were no longer in Maeve's class, and Father Rodriguez, the Catholic priest, looked uncomfortable. None of them would meet Maeve's eyes. Miss Harper. Vera's voice was warm, concerned. Thank you for coming. And Mr. Strickland, we weren't expecting you. I'm here to speak on Miss Harper's behalf, Caleb said. His voice was level, controlled, but Maeve could see the tension in his shoulders. How kind. Vera's smile didn't waver, though I'm not sure that's appropriate, given the nature of the concerns raised. What concerns? Caleb's tone sharpened. That she stayed late with a frightened child. That she cares about her students. That she's the best teacher Red Creek has ever had. No one questions Miss Harper's teaching abilities, Judge Blackwell said carefully. But there have been reports of improper conduct, Excessive familiarity with your family, specifically. Excessive familiarity? Caleb's laugh was harsh. She's been caring for my daughter after school because my previous housekeeper was negligent. She's been doing the job I hired her to do. There's nothing improper about it. Nevertheless, Vera said smoothly, perception matters. Multiple families have withdrawn their children due to concerns about Miss Harper's moral character. We have a responsibility to the community. The community you've poisoned against her with gossip and lies. Vera's eyes flashed. Mr. Strickland, I understand you're grieving, that you're lonely. But that doesn't excuse you from dragging an innocent young woman into scandal. I haven't dragged anyone anywhere. Caleb's voice was dangerously quiet. Miss Harper has done nothing but show kindness to a child who desperately needed it. If anyone has created scandal here, Mrs. Blackwell, it's you. The room went silent. No one spoke to Vera Blackwell that way, not in Red Creek. Vera's smile remained fixed, but her eyes went cold. I see. Well, this is precisely the kind of behavior that concerns us. Miss Harper, do you have anything to say in your defense? Maeve had been silent until now, watching the exchange with growing dread. Now all eyes turned to her. I've done my job to the best of my ability, she said quietly. I've cared for my students. I've maintained appropriate boundaries. If people have chosen to see something improper in kindness, I can't control that. Can't you? Vera leaned forward. You could have refused Mr. Strickland's offer to care for his daughter after school. You could have maintained professional distance. Instead, you've been seen dining at his home, spending time alone with him. I was invited to dinner to discuss Rosie's progress. Were you? Vera's tone made it clear she didn't believe a word. Miss Harper, I want to be clear. We're not questioning your morals per se. We're simply recognizing that your position requires not just competence, but also the appearance of propriety. And right now, that appearance has been compromised. By gossip you've spread, Caleb interjected. By choices Miss Harper made, Vera corrected smoothly. We'll vote now. All in favor of terminating Miss Harper's contract effective immediately? Vera's hand went up. Judge Blackwell's followed reluctantly. Marcus Sullivan looked pained but raised his hand. Robert Patterson stared at the table and did the same. 4 votes. 1 remained. Father Rodriguez sat very still. He was an older man, weathered by years in the territory, with kind eyes and a reputation for fairness. He looked at Maeve, then at Caleb, then at Vera. No, he said quietly. Vera's expression flickered. Father, I vote no. Miss Harper has done nothing wrong. She's been caught in gossip and speculation, yes. But I will not be party to destroying a woman's livelihood based on rumor. He met Vera's gaze steadily. Christ himself sat with sinners and outcasts. We would do well to remember that before we cast stones. The silence was absolute. Nevertheless, Vera said, her voice tight, 4-1 carries. Miss Harper, your contract is terminated. You have until Monday to clear your belongings from the schoolhouse. You'll receive 2 weeks' severance pay. This meeting is adjourned. Maeve stood. Her legs felt distant, unconnected to her body. This was happening. This was real. She'd lost everything. Caleb was on his feet immediately, his chair scraping back with a harsh sound. This is wrong. You know it's wrong. The vote has been cast, Mr. Strickland. Vera gathered her papers with precise movements. The decision is final. Like hell it is, Caleb's voice carried through the room. You've just destroyed an innocent woman's career based on lies and gossip. You should be ashamed. I'm protecting this community's children from moral corruption, Vera said, her tone sharp now. Something a man in your position should understand. Your own daughter deserves better than to be used as, don't you dare. Caleb's words were quiet but lethal. Don't you dare speak about my daughter. You don't know her, you don't know what she's been through, and you have no idea what Miss Harper has done for her. Judge Blackwell stood, placing a hand on his wife's arm. Vera, perhaps we should... The meeting is adjourned. Vera pulled away from her husband's touch. Good evening, gentlemen. Miss Harper? She swept from the room, her skirts rustling with indignation. The remaining board members filed out quickly, avoiding eye contact. Only Father Rodriguez paused at the door. I'm sorry, Miss Harper, he said quietly. I wish I could have done more. You tried, Maeve managed. Thank you for that. When he was gone, Maeve and Caleb stood alone in the empty meeting hall. The silence was crushing. I'll fight this, Caleb said. I'll go to the territorial governor if I have to. I'll hire lawyers. Stop. Maeve's voice came out steadier than she felt. It's over, Caleb. It's not over. I won't let them. You can't fix this. She turned to face him, and her eyes were dry. She'd cried all her tears the night before. They've made their decision. Fighting it will only make things worse. For you, for Rosie, for everyone. I don't care about that. Well, you should. The words came out sharp. Because I do. I care about what this is doing to your reputation. I care about how this is affecting Rosie. I care that you're putting your entire position in this community at risk for someone who isn't worth it. Don't say that. Caleb crossed to her, his hands coming up to grip her shoulders. Don't you dare say you're not worth it. I'm a broke schoolteacher with no prospects and a talent for making enemies. Maeve's laugh was bitter. I'm exactly not worth it. You're the first person in 3 years who's made me feel alive. You've given my daughter back her smile. You've reminded me what it means to care about something beyond just surviving. His voice was rough. How is that not worth fighting for? Maeve looked at him, this proud, damaged man who'd somehow decided she mattered, and felt something crack inside her chest. Because I'm leaving, Caleb. I have to leave. The words hung between them like a death sentence. No, he said it flatly. You're not leaving. I don't have a choice. Without a teaching position, I can't afford my room. I have maybe 2 weeks before my savings run out completely. And even if I could stay, what would I do? No one in this town will hire me now. Vera's made sure of that. Then stay at the ranch. Maeve stared at him. What? Stay at the ranch. We have plenty of room. You could... He was thinking fast now, desperate. You could continue tutoring Rosie. I'd pay you the same as your teaching salary, more if you need it. You wouldn't have to leave. Caleb, that would only confirm everything they're saying about us. I don't care what they're saying. But I do. The words burst out of her. Don't you understand? I've already lost my position, my reputation, everything I've worked for. If I move into your house, I'll lose the last shred of dignity I have left. People will say I'm your mistress, that I've been playing this game all along, that I finally got what I wanted. People are idiots. Maybe, but they're idiots whose opinions matter. Maeve pulled away from his grip. I can't do this, Caleb. I can't stay in Red Creek and watch you throw away your standing in this community for me. And I can't... Her voice cracked. I can't be near you and Rosie and pretend it doesn't hurt that I'm losing both of you. Caleb's face was anguished. Maeve, I need to go. She was moving toward the door now, needing air, needing space. I need to think. Wait. He caught her hand. Just wait, please. Give me a chance to make this right. There is no making it right. But she didn't pull away from his touch. Some things are just broken, Caleb, and no amount of wanting them fixed changes that. She left him standing in the empty hall, her hand slipping from his, and walked out into the November evening. The air was cold enough to burn her lungs. She welcomed the pain. It was something to focus on besides the grief threatening to swallow her whole. She didn't go back to her room. Instead, she walked to the schoolhouse, her schoolhouse, for 2 more days, and let herself in. The familiar space welcomed her like an old friend. Chalk dust and wood soap and the faint scent of the apple Sarah Chen had left on her desk that morning. Maeve moved through the rows of desks, touching each one. Tommy's, where he'd finally mastered long division. Sarah's, with the carved flowers she'd added when she thought no one was looking. Rosie's desk in the front row, positioned so she could see the board clearly despite her nearsightedness. All the children she'd taught, all the small victories and quiet moments, all of it ending because she'd dared to show kindness to the wrong family. She was still standing there an hour later when she heard the door open. She turned expecting Caleb, but it was Mrs. Chen who entered. The older woman's face was swollen from crying. Miss Harper. She crossed the room quickly. I'm so sorry. So sorry. I should have voted differently, should have spoken up, should have done something. You weren't at the meeting, Mrs. Chen. But I could have been. Could have fought for you. Instead, I withdrew my son because my husband said we couldn't afford trouble. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. You've been so good to us. You taught my Tommy to read, made him love learning, and I repaid you by abandoning you. You were protecting your family, Maeve said gently. I understand that. Understanding doesn't make it right. Mrs. Chen wiped her eyes. My grandmother had a saying, when good people stay silent, evil wins. I stayed silent. I let Vera Blackwell destroy you. She didn't destroy me. She just ended my teaching career in Red Creek. Is there a difference? Mrs. Chen's gaze was piercing. Teaching is who you are, Miss Harper. Everyone can see it. You don't just instruct children, you inspire them. Make them believe they can be more than their circumstances. Maeve's throat tightened. Thank you for saying that. It's the truth. Mrs. Chen hesitated, then reached into her pocket. I brought you something. Payment for the English tutoring I never properly compensated. I know it's not much, but I can't accept money from you. Please. The older woman pressed coins into Maeve's hand. Let me do this one thing. Let me help, even though I failed you when it mattered most. The coins were warm from Mrs. Chen's pocket. Maeve closed her fingers around them, feeling the weight of kindness she didn't deserve. Thank you, she whispered. Mrs. Chen embraced her quickly, then left before either of them could break down completely. Maeve stood alone in the darkening schoolhouse, holding $6 silver and feeling more lost than she'd ever been in her life. She went back to her room finally, climbing the stairs with leaden feet. Inside, she lit a candle and began to sort through her meager possessions. What to keep, what to sell, what to leave behind when she departed Red Creek forever. Not much in the end. 2 dresses, carefully mended, a few books she couldn't bear to part with, the teaching certificate from the Boston Normal School that had once meant everything and now felt like a cruel joke, some letters from her mother, dead now 5 years, the pearl earrings that had been her grandmother's, the only thing of value she owned. She could sell the earrings. They'd fetch enough to buy a stage ticket east, with maybe a little left over for food. She could go back to Boston, could try to find work as a governess or companion, could start over in a city that had already rejected her once, or she could go west to California. People said there were opportunities there for women willing to work hard. She could find a position in a mining town or ranching community, somewhere that didn't know about Red Creek or Vera Blackwell or the scandal that had destroyed her. Either way, she had to leave. That much was clear. She was folding her second dress when someone knocked on her door. She opened it to find Rosie standing in the hallway, holding a carefully wrapped bundle. Behind her, looking uncomfortable, was Miguel from the Strickland Ranch. Rosie? Maeve knelt immediately. What are you doing here? It's after dark. I had to see you. Rosie's eyes were red and puffy from crying. Papa told me about the meeting. He said you might have to go away. Maeve's heart shattered. Oh, sweetheart. You can't go away. Rosie's voice cracked. Please, Miss Harper, you can't leave like Mama did. You can't. I don't want to leave. Maeve pulled the child into her arms. But sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do. That's not fair. No, it's not fair. Rosie pulled back, shoving the bundle at Maeve. I brought you something, so you remember us. With trembling hands, Maeve unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a small leather-bound journal, the kind used for sketching. Every page was filled with Rosie's drawings. The schoolhouse, the mountains, horses, flowers, and on every other page, carefully rendered pictures of 3 figures, a tall man, a small girl, and a woman in a long dress. It's us, Rosie said unnecessarily. You and me and Papa, because even if you go away, we're still together in the pictures. We're still a family. Maeve couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. She held the journal like it was made of glass and felt tears finally break free. I love it, she managed. It's the most beautiful gift anyone's ever given me. Do you really have to go? I think so. But why? Just because some mean lady said bad things about you? That's stupid. Rosie, it is stupid. The little girl's voice was fierce. You're the best teacher ever. You're kind and smart and you make everything fun. And you're the only person besides Papa who doesn't look at me like I'm broken. You're not broken, sweetheart, not even a little bit. Mama dying broke me, Rosie said it matter-of-factly. Papa says it's normal to be sad. But I'm not just sad. I'm scared all the time that everyone I love will disappear. And then you came and you didn't disappear even when things got hard. But now you are disappearing and it's not fair. Maeve gathered the child close, pressing her face against blonde curls that smelled like sunshine and soap. I know it's not fair, and I'm so sorry, but I need you to remember something, all right? Just because I have to leave doesn't mean I'll stop caring about you. You're in my heart, Rosie Strickland, forever. Promise? I promise. They held each other for a long moment. Then Miguel cleared his throat apologetically. Miss Rosie, we need to get home. Your papa will worry. Rosie nodded, but didn't let go immediately. Miss Harper, will you write to me so I know you're okay? If your father allows it, yes. I'll write. He'll allow it. Rosie's voice was confident. He loves you too. Before Maeve could respond to that earth-shaking statement, the child had pulled away and run down the stairs. Miguel tipped his hat apologetically and followed. Maeve stood in her doorway, holding the journal, listening to their footsteps fade. Then she closed the door, sank onto her bed, and let herself break. She cried for the life she'd tried to build here, for the children she'd taught and the future she'd imagined, for Rosie's innocent heart and Caleb's grief-haunted eyes, for the loneliness that had driven her from Boston and the loneliness that would follow her wherever she went next. She cried until she had nothing left. Then she opened Rosie's journal and studied each drawing in the candlelight, memorizing every line, trying to capture this feeling, this bittersweet proof that she'd mattered to someone, even if only for a little while. The next morning, Saturday, Maeve woke to pounding on her door. She opened it to find Clara Patterson, Robert Patterson's wife, standing in the hallway. The woman's face was pale and furious. You need to see this, Clara said without preamble. The whole town needs to see this. She thrust a newspaper at Maeve, the Red Creek Gazette, published weekly. Maeve unfolded it with shaking hands and immediately saw the letter printed on the front page. To the citizens of Red Creek, it began. It has come to my attention that gross injustice has been perpetrated against Miss Maeve Harper, schoolteacher. I write this letter not as a wealthy rancher or a man of standing, but as a father whose daughter has been transformed by Miss Harper's kindness and dedication. It was signed by Caleb Strickland. Maeve's hands trembled as she read the rest. Caleb had laid everything out: Rosie's loneliness after Caroline's death, how Mrs. Halloway had neglected her duties, how Maeve had stayed with a frightened child and asked nothing in return. He described the arrangement he'd made, emphasizing that it was his idea, his insistence, his fault, if anyone's. He challenged the gossip directly, naming Vera Blackwell and accusing her of spreading malicious lies to destroy an innocent woman's reputation. My daughter needed someone who would see her as a person, not a tragedy, he'd written. Miss Harper gave her that. She gave her hope and joy and the belief that she deserves to be loved. If caring about a lonely child is grounds for dismissal, then we have lost our way as a community. If showing kindness is now considered scandalous, then we deserve every ounce of moral poverty that awaits us. The letter ended with a declaration that made Maeve's blood freeze. I will not stand by while good people are destroyed for political convenience. I will not be silent while cowards hide behind respectability and call it virtue. And I will not allow Miss Maeve Harper to be driven from this town without fighting with every resource at my disposal. This is not a suggestion. This is a promise. He sent it to every newspaper in the territory, Clara said. Tucson, Phoenix, even Santa Fe. By next week, everyone will know what Vera did. Maeve looked up from the paper. This will destroy him. Maybe, or maybe it will destroy her. Clara's smile was grim. My husband came home last night sick with guilt, said he'd voted wrong, that he'd let Vera bully him into ruining an innocent woman. We argued for hours. Finally, I told him he had a choice: stand up for what's right or sleep on the couch for the foreseeable future. Despite everything, Maeve felt a hysterical laugh bubble up. What did he choose? He chose the bed, and this morning he's calling an emergency meeting of families, everyone whose children you've taught. He's asking them to petition the school board, demand they reconsider your dismissal. That won't work. Vera's power comes from people being too afraid to challenge her. But Caleb Strickland just challenged her in the most public way possible. And he's not someone she can easily dismiss. Clara gripped Maeve's hand. There's going to be a fight, a real one. The question is whether you're brave enough to stay and see it through. I don't want to cause more trouble. Too late for that. Trouble's already here. Might as well make it mean something. Clara squeezed her hand once, then released it. Meeting's at 1 o'clock in the town square. I hope you'll come. She left before Maeve could respond. Maeve stood in her doorway, holding the newspaper, reading Caleb's words over and over. He'd put everything on the line for her. His reputation, his standing, his business relationships, all of it sacrificed in 3 columns of black ink. She should be furious. Should be terrified. Should absolutely not go to this meeting and give Vera Blackwell more ammunition. But Rosie's words echoed in her mind. You didn't disappear even when things got hard. Maybe it was time to stop running. At 1 o'clock, Maeve walked to the town square with her head high and her spine straight. She wore her best dress, the navy one with the carefully mended hem, and pinned her hair back severely. If she was going to face the town, she'd do it with dignity. She wasn't prepared for what she found. The square was packed, dozens of families, maybe more, people she recognized from school events, from church, from casual encounters on the street. They'd formed a loose semicircle around the courthouse steps, where Robert Patterson stood holding a piece of paper. Caleb was there too, standing slightly apart from the crowd with Rosie at his side. When he saw Maeve, something fierce and relieved crossed his face. Vera Blackwell stood on the courthouse steps, flanked by her husband. Her expression was carefully controlled, but Maeve could see the fury simmering beneath. This is highly irregular, Vera was saying. The school board has made its decision. A decision based on gossip, not facts. Robert Patterson's voice carried across the square. A decision I now regret participating in. A murmur ran through the crowd. Mr. Patterson, you're overwrought, Vera said. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No more private discussions. Patterson looked at the paper in his hands. I have here a petition signed by 43 families. 43. All requesting that Miss Harper's dismissal be reversed and that she be reinstated immediately with a formal apology from the school board. The murmur became a wave of sound. Vera's face went white. This is absurd, she said. Miss Harper has been dismissed for cause. For no cause except your jealousy, a voice called out. Mrs. Chen stepped forward from the crowd. You wanted to punish Caleb Strickland for rejecting your attempts to control him, so you attacked the one person he cares about. Don't pretend this is about morality. It's about power. How dare you? How dare you? Another voice, this time from an older rancher Maeve recognized but couldn't name. My grandson is finally reading because of Miss Harper. Actually reading, not just pretending. She spent extra time with him every day for a month, never asked for additional payment, never complained. And you want to fire her because she was kind to a motherless child? More voices joined in, telling stories Maeve had forgotten or never known about. Tommy Chen's mother described how Maeve had taught her English while tutoring her son, refusing payment. Sarah's father talked about the books Maeve had lent his daughter, opening up worlds beyond their small ranch. Parents spoke of patience and dedication and the way their children came home excited about learning instead of dreading school. Vera tried to speak over them, tried to regain control, but the tide had turned. These were people who'd been silent out of fear or social pressure, and Caleb's letter had given them permission to finally speak truth. Enough. Judge Blackwell's voice cut through the chaos. He looked tired, older than his 50 years. This has gone far enough, Vera. James? No. He turned to face his wife, and there was something broken in his expression. I've let you run roughshod over this town for too long, turned a blind eye to your manipulations because it was easier than fighting, but this, he gestured at the crowd. This is wrong. You've used my position, my authority, to settle personal grievances, and I'm done enabling it. Vera stared at him as if he'd struck her. You can't be serious. I am. Deadly serious. He looked at Patterson. Call an emergency board meeting tonight. We'll vote again. And if I vote to uphold the dismissal, Vera's voice was venomous, then you'll be outvoted, because I guarantee Patterson, Rodriguez, and I will vote to reinstate Miss Harper. That's 3-2. Your opinion, for once, won't matter." The crowd erupted in cheers. Vera stood frozen, her carefully constructed power crumbling around her. For just a moment, Maeve almost felt sorry for her. This woman who'd built her entire identity on control and influence, watching it slip away. Then Vera's gaze locked on Maeve, and the pity evaporated. The hatred in those eyes was pure and absolute. "This isn't over," Vera said quietly, just loud enough for Maeve to hear. Then she turned and walked away, her spine rigid with rage. Judge Blackwell approached Maeve. "Miss Harper, on behalf of the school board, I apologize. You've been treated abominably. We'll meet tonight and formally reverse the dismissal. You'll be reinstated with full back pay and a raise. Consider it compensation for the damage done." Maeve couldn't find words. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank Caleb Strickland for having the courage to speak truth when the rest of us were too cowardly." He tipped his hat and followed his wife, leaving Maeve standing in the square surrounded by families who were suddenly pressing forward to speak to her, to apologize, to promise their children would return to school on Monday. Through the crowd, Maeve's eyes found Caleb. He'd stayed back, letting others have their say, but he was watching her with an expression that made her heart stutter. Rosie broke free from her father's hand and ran to Maeve, throwing her arms around her waist. "You're staying! You're really staying!" "I'm staying," Maeve confirmed, still dazed. She looked over Rosie's head at Caleb. "I'm staying." He nodded once, and in that small gesture, Maeve saw everything, relief and hope, and something deeper that neither of them was ready to name. The town had made its choice. Now she had to figure out what that meant for the three of them. The emergency board meeting that night was mercifully brief. Judge Blackwell, Robert Patterson, and Father Rodriguez voted to reinstate Maeve with a formal apology and a salary increase funded by an anonymous donor everyone knew was Caleb Strickland. Vera Blackwell and Marcus Sullivan voted against, but their opposition no longer mattered. The motion carried 3-2. Maeve stood before the board, accepting their decision with as much grace as she could manage, while Vera sat rigid in her chair, staring straight ahead with a face carved from ice. When the meeting adjourned, Vera swept from the room without a word, leaving behind a silence that felt both victorious and uneasy. "She won't forget this," Father Rodriguez murmured to Maeve as they filed out. "Be careful, child. Wounded pride is a dangerous thing." But Maeve was too relieved, too exhausted, too overwhelmed to worry about future battles. She'd won this one. That was enough for now. Monday morning arrived cold and bright. Maeve walked to the schoolhouse with her heart in her throat, half expecting to find it empty despite the promises and petitions. Instead, she found 20 children waiting, more than before. Families who'd never sent their children to school had enrolled them over the weekend, a quiet statement of support. Tommy Chen beamed at her from his seat. Sarah waved enthusiastically. The Morrison boys were back, looking sheepish. Even the Thompson children had returned, though their mother wouldn't meet Maeve's eyes when she dropped them off. And Rosie, in her usual spot in the front row, was practically vibrating with joy. "Welcome back, class," Maeve said, and her voice only shook a little. "Let's begin." The day unfolded with a normalcy that felt miraculous. She taught spelling and arithmetic and geography, read them a chapter from a new adventure novel, supervised recess without incident. Parents arrived at day's end with shy smiles and mumbled apologies. Life, it seemed, was trying to return to something resembling normal. At 4 o'clock, Caleb arrived for Rosie. The other families had cleared out, giving them privacy that felt both generous and pointed. "How was it?" he asked. "Good. Really good." Maeve gestured at the full classroom. 20 students. The school board is already talking about hiring an assistant for next term. "You deserve that and more." He paused, then pulled an envelope from his pocket. "This came for you, from the board. Your reinstatement paperwork and the first installment of your raise." Maeve took it with trembling fingers. Inside was more money than she'd seen in months. Enough to pay off her back rent, buy new supplies for the classroom, and still have savings left over. The anonymous donor had been more than generous. "Caleb, before you say anything," he interrupted, "this isn't charity. It's what you're worth. What you've always been worth." He met her eyes. "And it comes with no strings attached. I'm not trying to buy your affection or obligate you to anything. I just want you to have what you need to do your job well." Maeve looked at this complicated man who'd risked everything to defend her honor, who'd loved his wife so deeply he'd nearly drowned in grief when she died, who was trying so hard to be a good father despite having no idea how. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For the money, yes, but mostly for believing in me when no one else did. People believed in you. They were just too afraid to say it." "And you weren't afraid?" "I was terrified." His laugh was rough. "But I was more terrified of losing you, of watching you leave and knowing I'd done nothing to stop it." Rosie, who'd been gathering her belongings, chose that moment to return. She looked between the two adults, her expression far too knowing for a 6-year-old. "Are you two going to get married now?" she asked with the bluntness of childhood. Caleb choked. Maeve felt heat flood her face. "Rosie," Caleb began. "What?" "Everyone's saying you love each other. Tommy's mama told Mrs. Chen that's why you wrote the letter, and Mrs. Patterson said it was the most romantic thing she'd ever heard. So if you love each other, you should get married. That's how it works." "Life is more complicated than that, sweetheart," Caleb said carefully. "Why?" "You love Miss Harper. She loves you. I love both of you. We should all live together and be a family." Rosie said it as if it were the simplest equation in the world. "That's what I wished for on my birthday candles." Maeve's heart was beating so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She didn't dare look at Caleb, couldn't bear to see his expression. "Your birthday is in March, Rosie," Caleb said, his voice strained. "That's 4 months away." "I know. I'm wishing early so it has time to come true." Rosie picked up her slate. "Can we go home now? Maria said she was making tamales." She skipped out the door, leaving the two adults staring at each other in stunned silence. "I'm sorry," Caleb said finally. "She's been obsessed with this idea since you stayed with her that first night. I've tried to explain." "It's all right." Maeve's voice came out steadier than she felt. "She's a child. She sees the world in simple terms." "Yes," he paused. "Though sometimes I think children see things more clearly than adults do. We complicate everything with fear and propriety and what other people think." "Caleb, I'm not proposing," he said quickly. "That's not what I'm doing. But I'm saying that Rosie isn't entirely wrong. I do—" He stopped, searching for words. "I care about you, Maeve. More than I probably should. More than is convenient or sensible. And I hope, you feel something similar." Maeve's throat was tight. "I do, but that doesn't mean I know. We barely know each other. You're just getting your position back. The town is watching every move we make. There are 1,000 reasons to go slowly, to be careful, to maintain appropriate distance." He moved closer. "But I spent 3 years being careful, being numb, being safe. And it nearly killed me. So I'm asking, can we at least try? Can we see if this thing between us is real, or if it's just two lonely people grabbing at hope?" It was the most vulnerable Maeve had ever seen him. This man who kept everything locked tight was offering her something precious and terrifying, the possibility of more. "We'll have to be discreet," she heard herself say. "At least for a while. Let the scandal die down before we give people new things to gossip about. We can be discreet, and we go slowly, no rushing into anything." "Slowly," he agreed. "And if it doesn't work, if we realize this is just proximity and loneliness, we end it cleanly. No drama, for Rosie's sake." "For Rosie's sake," he echoed. Then, with the ghost of a smile, "Though I should warn you, I'm not good at this. Dating, courtship, whatever you want to call it, I was barely adequate at it 20 years ago. Now I'm rusty and grief-scarred and probably terrible company. I'll take my chances." Maeve felt something uncurl in her chest, something that might have been hope. "Besides, I'm not exactly an expert either. My last courtship ended with my fiancé deciding I was too outspoken for polite society. Then he was an idiot." "He was. But that's a story for another day." She gathered her things. "I should go. Let you get Rosie home before she decides to skip dinner and live on birthday wishes." Caleb nodded, but didn't move. They stood there in the empty schoolhouse. the late afternoon sun streaming through the windows, both of them aware they'd just made a choice that would change everything. "Maeve?" His voice was soft. "Thank you. For staying. For fighting. For giving us a chance. Thank you for making me believe I was worth fighting for." They left the schoolhouse together, walking side by side but not touching, maintaining the careful distance of two people who were trying very hard not to scandalize anyone else. But when Rosie grabbed both their hands and swung between them, chattering about tamales and her new reader and how she'd drawn another picture of the three of them, neither adult pulled away. Some things, it seemed, were worth the risk. The next few weeks unfolded with cautious optimism. Maeve's classroom filled and stayed full. Parents who'd been cold now offered genuine warmth. The school board approved funds for new books and supplies. Father Rodriguez had quietly shamed the members into generosity. Even Vera Blackwell's influence seemed to have waned. People still attended her social gatherings, but with less enthusiasm, less fear. Caleb came by the schoolhouse every day at 4, sometimes staying to talk about Rosie's progress, sometimes just exchanging a few words before taking his daughter home. They were careful, proper, always aware of watching eyes. But the connection between them deepened with each encounter, each shared glance, each moment of understanding that needed no words. On Sundays, after church, Caleb would invite Maeve to the ranch for dinner. Always with Rosie present, always entirely appropriate. They'd eat Maria's cooking and talk about books or ranching or teaching, and Rosie would beam like she'd orchestrated something wonderful. Which, in a way, she had. It was during one of these Sunday dinners, 3 weeks after the town square confrontation, that things shifted. Rosie had gone upstairs to fetch a drawing she wanted to show Maeve, leaving the two adults alone on the veranda. The December evening was cool but not cold, the sky fading from gold to purple. "She's doing better," Maeve observed. "More confident, happier." "Because of you," Caleb said. "You've given her something I couldn't, the sense that it's safe to hope again. You've done the same for her. You've started showing up, Caleb, really showing up. She notices." "I'm trying." He turned to face her, and his expression was serious. "Maeve, there's something I need to tell you, something I've been avoiding because I didn't want to scare you off." Her stomach tightened. "What is it?" "I'm falling in love with you." The words came out rough but certain. "Maybe I already have fallen. I don't know. I just know that when I wake up, you're the first thing I think about. When something good happens, I want to tell you. When Rosie smiles, I want you there to see it. And the thought of you not being in our lives—" He stopped, shook his head. "It's unbearable." Maeve's heart was racing. "Caleb, I know it's too soon. I know we agreed to go slowly, but I can't keep pretending this is casual for me. It's not." He met her eyes. "You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." Maeve looked at this man who'd been broken by loss and was learning to live again, who defended her when it cost him everything, who loved his daughter with fierce devotion and was offering Maeve the same. "I'm falling too," she said quietly, "and it terrifies me, because the last time I trusted someone with my heart, he crushed it. And the time before that I lost my mother and the grief nearly destroyed me. So yes, I'm falling, but I'm also scared of what happens when I land." "I can't promise you won't get hurt," Caleb said. "I can't promise this will work out the way we hope, but I can promise I'll never lie to you, never betray you, never make you question your worth. And if it does end, though I'll do everything in my power to prevent that, I'll make sure you land softly." It was exactly the right thing to say. Not a declaration that everything would be perfect, but an acknowledgement that love was risk and courage, both. Maeve reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers immediately, warm and solid and real. "Okay," she said. "I'm in. Fully in. Whatever this is, wherever it goes, I'm in." Caleb's smile transformed his face, softening the hard edges grief had carved. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture so old-fashioned and tender it made her throat tight. "Papa, Miss Harper, look what I found!" Rosie's voice floated down from upstairs, and they pulled apart quickly, both laughing a little at their own nervousness. When Rosie appeared with a dried flower pressed between book pages, a gift from her mother, carefully preserved, she looked between the two adults and her face lit up. "You're holding hands," she announced, delighted. "We are," Caleb confirmed. "Does this mean you're courting?" That's what Mrs. Chen called it when Mr. Chen brought her flowers every day before they got married. Maeve looked at Caleb, and he looked back, and something passed between them, a shared understanding, a mutual decision. "Yes," Maeve said, "we're courting." Rosie's whoop of joy could probably be heard in town. She launched herself at both of them, hugging as much as she could reach, and for a moment they were a tangle of arms and laughter and happiness. This, Maeve thought, this was what home felt like. But even as the thought formed, she caught movement from the corner of her eye. Through the ranch's front gate, barely visible in the fading light, a figure on horseback sat watching. Too far away to identify clearly, but Maeve knew. Vera Blackwell never admitted defeat. She just regrouped. The next morning, Maeve found a note slipped under her door. Anonymous, written in a hand she didn't recognize. "You've made an enemy of the wrong woman. Leave town while you still can." She showed it to Caleb that afternoon, and his face went hard. This is Vera's style. Subtle threats, anonymous warnings. She did the same thing to Caroline when we first married. He crumpled the note. "I'll talk to the sheriff." "And say what? Someone left an anonymous note? They'll tell you there's nothing they can do." "Then I'll talk to Vera directly." That's exactly what she wants, to provoke you into a confrontation she can use against us. Maeve touched his arm. "We ignore it. We don't give her power by reacting." "I don't like this." "Neither do I, but fighting her openly just creates more scandal. Better to let her make mistakes than to hand her ammunition." Caleb agreed reluctantly, but his jaw stayed tight with anger. That night, he assigned Miguel to keep watch near Maeve's boarding room, just in case. It was both touching and troubling, evidence that even victory came with costs. The threats didn't stop. Over the next week, Maeve found 3 more notes, each slightly more pointed. Her classroom supplies went missing and turned up damaged. Someone spread a rumor that she'd been seen sneaking out to the Strickland Ranch after dark. Small things, individually meaningless but collectively designed to erode her hard-won credibility. Maeve weathered it with gritted teeth and stubborn pride. She wouldn't be driven out. Not again. Not by someone whose power came from fear and manipulation. Then, 2 weeks before Christmas, everything came to a head. Maeve was walking home from school when she encountered Vera on the street. The older woman was emerging from the milliner's shop, packages in hand, looking every inch the respectable society matron. "Miss Harper," Vera said, her tone poisonously sweet. "How lovely to see you." "Mrs. Blackwell," Maeve kept her voice neutral. "I hear congratulations are in order. You and Mr. Strickland are courting openly now. How modern of you. If you'll excuse me, I wonder, does he know about Boston?" Vera's smile was sharp. "About why you really left? The scandal with that banker, what was his name? James Morrison?" Maeve's blood went cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Vera stepped closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I have connections in Boston, dear. Social connections. They remember you quite well. The idealistic young teacher who destroyed her engagement by publicly accusing her fiancé of exploiting his workers, who made such a scene at a charity ball that she was asked to leave polite society entirely." Her smile widened. "Does Caleb know you have a history of destroying relationships with your righteous indignation?" "That's not what happened." "Isn't it? From what I hear, you had a perfectly good match, wealthy, established, respectable, and you threw it away because you couldn't keep your opinions to yourself, just like you're doing here." Vera's expression was triumphant. "Men tire of crusaders, Miss Harper. Even men who think they want strength eventually prefer obedience. Caleb will realize that, and when he does, you'll have no one to blame but yourself." Maeve wanted to argue, wanted to defend herself, but the words stuck in her throat, because there was a grain of truth in what Vera was saying. She had destroyed her engagement by refusing to stay silent about injustice. She had chosen principle over security, and it had cost her everything. Was she doing it again? Was she dooming this relationship before it even truly began? "Nothing to say?" Vera's voice was satisfied. I thought not. Well, enjoy your courtship while it lasts, dear. I give it until spring before Caleb realizes what kind of woman you really are. She swept away, leaving Maeve standing frozen on the street corner, doubt seeping into her heart like poison. That evening, when Caleb came to walk her home from school, a new routine he'd insisted on after the threats began, he immediately sensed something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked. "Nothing. Just tired." "Maeve." He stopped, turning to face her. "Don't lie to me. We promised honesty, remember?" She wanted to brush it off, to protect him from Vera's poison, but they had promised honesty. "I ran into Vera," she said quietly. "She knows about Boston, about my broken engagement." Caleb's expression went carefully neutral. "Tell me." So she did. Standing in the fading December light, she told him everything. About James Morrison, the banker who'd seemed perfect until she'd discovered he was systematically underpaying his immigrant workers. About the confrontation at the charity ball where she'd publicly called him out. About the social exile that had followed. The whispered accusations that she was difficult, inappropriate, too outspoken for her own good. "Everyone said I should have handled it privately," she finished. "That I should have been diplomatic, should have protected his reputation. But I couldn't. Those workers had families, children. They were being exploited, and everyone knew it, and no one cared because James had money and influence. So I spoke up, and I lost everything." She waited for him to say something, anything, waited for the judgment, the disappointment, the realization that Vera was right. Instead, Caleb took her face in his hands. "You did the right thing," he said firmly. "Maybe not the easy thing, or the safe thing, or the thing that protected you, but the right thing. And I'm proud of you for it." Maeve's eyes burned. "Even though it makes me difficult? Even though I have a history of destroying relationships by refusing to compromise? You didn't destroy anything. James Morrison destroyed your relationship by being a coward who exploited vulnerable people. You just had the courage to call him on it." His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. "And if I'm ever that kind of man, the kind who asks you to compromise your principles for my comfort, I hope you'll leave me too, because that would mean I'd stop deserving you." The tears spilled over. "Vera said you'd get tired of me, that men always do. Vera Blackwell is bitter and cruel and desperate to prove that her miserable marriage is somehow normal." His voice was fierce. "I will never tire of you, Maeve. I'll never ask you to be smaller or quieter or less yourself. And if standing by your principles means we have to weather storms together, then so be it. I'd rather have storms with you than calm seas with someone who doesn't challenge me to be better." "How are you real?" The words came out broken. "I'm real because you make me real. Because caring about you has brought me back to life." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Vera can spread all the rumors she wants. She can dig up every past mistake and present them as character flaws. It won't change how I feel about you." Maeve kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't proper, wasn't appropriate for a public street where anyone could see. But she kissed him anyway, pouring 3 weeks of careful courtship and a lifetime of loneliness into the press of her lips against his. Caleb made a sound low in his throat and kissed her back, his arms coming around her, solid and sure. It was brief. They were still in town, still being watched, but it was also perfect. When they pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Maeve smiled up at him. "There," she said. "Now Vera will have something real to gossip about." Caleb laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. They walked home hand in hand after that kiss, and if people stared, neither of them cared. The damage was done, or the healing had begun, depending on how you looked at it. Either way, there was no going back to careful distance and proper restraint. The next morning, Maeve arrived at school to find a crowd gathered outside. Her stomach dropped, expecting vandalism or another anonymous threat. Instead, she found families standing in the cold December air, holding wrapped packages and baked goods. Mrs. Chen stepped forward first. "We heard about Vera's threats, about the notes and the rumors. We wanted you to know—" She gestured at the assembled families. "We're with you, all of us." "We won't let her drive you out again," Clara Patterson added. "Not after what you've done for our children. Not after you stood up to the whole town when it would have been easier to run." Tommy's father, a quiet man who rarely spoke, cleared his throat. My boy couldn't read 6 months ago. Thought he was stupid, was starting to believe it himself. Now he reads to his little sister every night. That's because of you, Miss Harper. Because you saw something in him no one else did. One by one, parents came forward with stories. Children Maeve had tutored, encouraged, believed in when they'd stopped believing in themselves. The gifts piled up, preserves and bread, knitted scarves, a beautiful quilt pieced together by a dozen hands. Physical proof that she mattered, that her work had meaning beyond just teaching letters and numbers. Maeve stood there with tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the simple grace of people who'd found their courage and decided to use it to protect someone who'd protected their children. Thank you, she managed. All of you. Her voice broke. Thank you. The school day that followed was chaotic in the best way. Children who'd brought cookies insisted on sharing them during recess. Sarah Chen organized an impromptu concert where the students sang Christmas carols, slightly off-key but filled with enthusiasm. Even the Morrison boys, usually troublemakers, behaved like angels. At 4 o'clock, when Caleb arrived with Rosie, he took one look at Maeve's face, still blotchy from crying, but radiant, and smiled. Good day? He asked. The best, she said. The very best. That weekend, Caleb invited Maeve to the ranch for a special dinner. Not Sunday's usual casual meal, but something more formal. When she arrived, wearing her best dress with her hair carefully arranged, she found the dining room transformed. Candles on the table, Maria's finest dishes, and Rosie dressed in a velvet dress that must have been her mother's, carefully altered to fit. What's all this? Maeve asked. We wanted to do something special, Rosie announced, to celebrate. Celebrate what? Caleb pulled out a chair for her, his hand lingering on her shoulder. Everything. Your reinstatement, the town standing up for you, the fact that we're all still here, together. It was one of the loveliest evenings Maeve could remember. They ate and talked and laughed, and for the first time since arriving in Red Creek, Maeve felt like she belonged, not just to the town, but to this small family that had somehow claimed her heart. After dinner, while Rosie was upstairs preparing for bed, Caleb led Maeve out to the veranda. The December night was cold but clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. I have something for you, he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Maeve's heart stuttered. Caleb, it's not what you think. Not yet. He opened the box to reveal a delicate silver locket. This was Caroline's. She wore it every day until the end. I want you to have it. Maeve stared at the locket, stunned. I can't take this. It's too precious, It's exactly right. Caleb lifted the locket from the box. Caroline would have liked you, I think. Would have appreciated your fire, your refusal to compromise. And she'd want Rosie to have someone who loves her the way you do. He opened the locket, revealing 2 tiny photographs, one of Caroline, one of Rosie as a baby. I'm not asking you to replace her. I'm asking you to add to what she started, to help me raise our daughter and maybe, someday, have a future neither of us thought possible. Is this? Maeve's voice shook. Are you asking me to marry you? Not yet, but soon. He fastened the locket around her neck, his fingers warm against her skin. I want to do this right, Maeve. Want to court you properly. Let the town see that we're serious, give Rosie time to adjust. But I also want you to know my intentions. I'm not playing games or passing time. I want you in my life, in our lives, permanently. Maeve touched the locket, feeling the weight of it against her chest, history and hope combined. I want that too, more than I've ever wanted anything. They kissed then, slow and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Caleb was smiling in a way that made him look years younger. Papa, Miss Harper? Rosie's voice drifted from the doorway. Can I come out now? They broke apart, laughing. Yes, sweetheart. Rosie bounded onto the veranda and immediately noticed the locket. Her eyes went wide. That's Mama's necklace. You're wearing Mama's necklace. Your father gave it to me, Maeve said carefully. Is that all right with you? Rosie was quiet for a long moment, studying Maeve's face. Then she reached out and touched the locket with one small finger. "Mama would be happy," she said finally, "that Papa isn't sad anymore, that I have someone who reads to me and helps with my letters and doesn't forget to pick me up from school." She looked up at Maeve. "Are you going to stay forever now? If your father and I have our way, yes." "Good." Rosie hugged her tightly. "Because I love you, Miss Harper, almost as much as I loved Mama. Is that okay? To love both of you?" Maeve's throat was too tight to speak, so she just held the little girl and nodded against her hair. Over Rosie's head, she met Caleb's eyes and saw the same emotion reflected there. Grief and gratitude tangled together, the past and future meeting in this single moment. Christmas came 2 weeks later, and with it, a transformation. The town that had nearly destroyed Maeve now embraced her fully. Families invited her to holiday gatherings. The Ladies' Aid Society, which had been Vera's domain, voted to make Maeve an honorary member over Vera's strenuous objections. Even Marcus Sullivan, who'd voted against her reinstatement, apologized stiffly and offered to fund new desks for the schoolhouse. Vera Blackwell had become increasingly isolated. Her social gatherings were poorly attended. Her opinions, once gospel, were now openly questioned. She'd made the fatal mistake of attacking someone the community had decided to love, and Red Creek had long memories. On Christmas Eve, Maeve attended services at Father Rodriguez's church. She sat with Caleb and Rosie, the three of them filling a pew that had been empty for too long. When they stood to sing carols, Caleb's hand found hers, and Rosie beamed like she'd arranged the whole thing. After the service, as families mingled outside in the cold night air, Judge Blackwell approached them. His wife was notably absent. "Mr. Strickland, Miss Harper." He tipped his hat. "Might I have a word?" They stepped aside while Rosie ran off to play with the other children. "I owe you both an apology," the judge said. "A real one, not the perfunctory one I gave at the board meeting. I've been complicit in my wife's behavior for too long, turned a blind eye to her manipulations because addressing them would have been inconvenient." He looked genuinely remorseful. "What she did to you, Miss Harper, was unconscionable, and I should have stopped it long before Mr. Strickland was forced to take matters into his own hands." "Thank you for saying that," Maeve said. "I'm saying it because it needs to be said. And because—" He hesitated. "Vera and I are separating. She's returning to her sister in Colorado after the new year. It's for the best. She's not happy here, hasn't been for years, and I'm tired of enabling her cruelty." Caleb and Maeve exchanged glances. It was a shocking announcement. Divorce was scandalous, separation barely less so. But looking at the judge's face, Maeve saw only relief. "I hope you both find peace," she said quietly. "As do I." He nodded to them both and walked away, shoulders straighter than they'd been in months. "Well," Caleb said, "that's unexpected. But not unwelcome." Maeve watched Vera's husband disappear into the crowd. Maybe some people can change after all. Speaking of change, Caleb pulled her into the shadows beside the church. "I have something to ask you." Maeve's heart began to race. "Here? Now?" "Not yet, but soon. Very soon." His smile was warm. "I'm just warning you to be prepared." Christmas Day at the Strickland Ranch was magical. Maria had outdone herself with a feast that could feed an army. Caleb had surprised Rosie with a new pony, a gentle mare perfect for a young rider. And Rosie had made gifts for everyone, drawings carefully framed, a scarf she'd knitted with crooked but enthusiastic stitches, a book of poems she'd written about the ranch and the mountains and the family she loved. Maeve's gift to Rosie was a collection of books, adventure stories and fairy tales and poetry. To Caleb, she gave a journal bound in leather, its pages blank and waiting for whatever stories he wanted to tell. "For the memories we're making," she said, "so we don't forget." He kissed her softly, right there in front of Rosie and Maria and the ranch hands who'd been invited to share the meal. No one seemed scandalized. If anything, they looked pleased. That evening, after the festivities had wound down and Rosie had finally consented to bed, Caleb took Maeve's hand. "Walk with me," he said. They bundled into coats and scarves and walked out into the December night. The ranch was beautiful under moonlight, silver and blue and impossibly peaceful. Their breath formed clouds in the cold air as they made their way to a small grove of cottonwood trees at the edge of the property. Caroline and I planted these, Caleb said, gesturing at the trees, the year Rosie was born. She said every new beginning deserved to be marked with something living, something that would grow alongside our daughter. Maeve waited, sensing this was important. I've brought you here because, he turned to face her, because I want you to know the whole truth about Caroline, about our marriage, about why I've been so careful with you. You don't have to. I do. He took both her hands. Caroline and I loved each other, but it wasn't the passionate romance people imagine. We were friends first, partners. We respected each other, supported each other, built a good life together. But I always wondered if there was more. If I was capable of the kind of love that consumed people, changed them fundamentally. He paused, his eyes searching hers in the moonlight. And then you walked into my life, and I understood. What I felt for Caroline was real and good, and I'll always treasure it. But what I feel for you is different, bigger, more terrifying and more wonderful. You challenge me, infuriate me, make me want to be better than I am. And I'm not just falling in love with you, Maeve. I've already fallen, completely, irrevocably. Maeve's breath caught. Caleb, I'm not comparing you to her. You're not replacements for each other. But I need you to know that what we have, it's not second best. It's not settling. It's everything I didn't know I was capable of feeling. He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket. Which is why I'm asking now, under the trees where I once celebrated a beginning, if you'll give me a chance at a new one. He dropped to one knee and Maeve's vision blurred with tears. Maeve Harper, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, Rosie's mother, my partner in all things? Will you take on this grief-haunted rancher and his complicated life and help me make it into something beautiful again? The ring he held out was simple, a gold band with a small diamond, nothing ostentatious, perfectly her. Yes, Maeve said, the word coming out choked. Yes, absolutely yes. Caleb surged to his feet and kissed her, deep and thorough and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. I love you, she said, the words finally free. I love you and Rosie and this life we're building. I love that you see me, really see me, and don't ask me to be anything other than who I am. I love you, he replied, and I can't wait to spend the rest of my life proving it. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and when they entered, they found Rosie sitting on the stairs in her nightgown, clearly having snuck out of bed. Did you ask her? Rosie demanded. I did, Caleb confirmed. And? Maeve held up her hand, showing the ring. I said yes. Rosie shrieked with joy and launched herself at both of them. They caught her in a tangle of arms and laughter, the three of them holding each other in the warm ranch house, while the December wind sang outside. When's the wedding? Rosie asked when she'd calmed down slightly. Spring, Caleb said. April or May, after the last frost. Can I be in it? Can I wear a fancy dress and carry flowers? You can do all of that and more, Maeve promised. You're the most important part of this whole thing, sweetheart. None of this works without you. They spent the rest of the evening planning, Rosie offering increasingly elaborate suggestions, Caleb gently reining in the more outlandish ideas, Maeve trying to keep up with both of them. By the time they finally got Rosie back to bed, it was well past midnight. Stay, Caleb said as Maeve gathered her things. It's late, and the ride back to town is cold. Stay in one of the guest rooms. People will talk. Let them. We're engaged now, properly, officially engaged. And besides, he smiled, I'm tired of worrying about what people think, tired of letting fear dictate how we live. I love you. You love me. Rosie loves us both. That's what matters. So Maeve stayed, sleeping in a guest room down the hall from Rosie, waking to the smell of Maria's cooking and the sound of Caleb's voice calling everyone to breakfast. It felt like a preview of the future, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. The engagement announcement appeared in the Red Creek Gazette the following week. Father Rodriguez blessed the union from his pulpit. The Ladies' Aid Society immediately began planning a wedding that threatened to involve the entire town. Vera Blackwell, true to Judge Blackwell's word, departed for Colorado without comment, leaving behind a vacuum that the community filled with warmth and celebration. The winter months passed in a blur of wedding preparations and teaching and the deepening joy of being part of a family. Maeve moved some of her belongings to the ranch, though she kept her room in town to maintain propriety until the wedding. Caleb started accompanying her to school events, standing in the back of the room with other parents, beaming with pride. Rosie told anyone who would listen that she was getting a new mother, carefully explaining that it wasn't replacing the old one, just adding to the love. In March, on Rosie's 7th birthday, they celebrated with a party at the ranch. 20 children ran wild through the house and grounds, while parents stood around drinking punch and marveling at how much had changed in 6 months. Mrs. Chen pulled Maeve aside at one point. "You've transformed this family," she said, "given them back their joy. That's a rare gift." "They've transformed me too," Maeve replied. "Reminded me that taking risks on people is worth it, that love is worth fighting for." April arrived with warm winds and the promise of renewal. The cottonwood trees at the edge of the Strickland property burst into leaf. Wildflowers carpeted the desert. And on a perfect Saturday morning, with the whole town gathered beneath those same cottonwood trees, Maeve Harper married Caleb Strickland. She wore a simple white dress that Clara Patterson had helped her sew, with Caroline's locket around her neck, a blessing from the past joining the promise of the future. Rosie stood beside her in blue velvet, holding a bouquet of desert marigolds and grinning so wide her face must have hurt. Caleb stood at the makeshift altar in his best suit, looking nervous and happy and more alive than anyone had seen him in 3 years. When Maeve walked toward him on Father Rodriguez's arm, her own father long dead, the priest offering to stand in, his eyes filled with tears. Father Rodriguez kept the ceremony brief. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising partnership and respect, and the courage to keep choosing each other even when it was hard. When Caleb slipped the wedding band onto Maeve's finger, his hands were shaking. "I love you," he whispered, just for her. "I love you," she whispered back. "You may kiss your bride," Father Rodriguez announced, and Caleb did, thoroughly enough that Rosie giggled and several people applauded. The reception that followed was pure joy. Maria had prepared a feast. Someone had brought a fiddle, someone else a guitar, and impromptu dancing broke out in the ranch yard. Children ran wild, adults laughed and told stories, and for one perfect afternoon, the community that had nearly torn Maeve apart instead celebrated her happiness. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains gold and crimson, Caleb found Maeve standing slightly apart from the crowd, watching the celebration with wonder. "Happy?" he asked, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. "Impossibly happy." She leaned back against him. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over. Thought I'd lost everything that mattered. And now you have everything that matters," he finished. "We both do." Rosie ran up then, breathless from dancing. "Papa, Maeve, come dance with me." "It's Mama now, remember?" Caleb said gently. "That's what we agreed." Rosie looked at Maeve, suddenly shy. "Is it okay to call you Mama?" Maeve knelt down, cupping the little girl's face. "It's more than okay. It's perfect. Because that's what I am now, your Mama. Not replacing the one you lost, but adding to the love she started." Rosie threw her arms around Maeve's neck. "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, sweetheart. So much." They danced together as a family, Caleb and Maeve with Rosie between them, the three of them moving to fiddle music under a darkening sky. Around them, the people of Red Creek celebrated, and overhead, the first stars began to appear. Later, much later, when the guests had finally departed and Rosie had been tucked into bed, protesting that she wasn't tired, she wanted to stay up forever. Today was the best day of her life. Caleb and Maeve stood together on the veranda of their home. Their home. The words still felt new and wonderful. "Thank you," Caleb said quietly. "For what?" "For staying. For fighting. For loving us even when it was complicated and scary and would have been so much easier to run." He turned her to face him. "You could have left Red Creek after that first board meeting, could have packed your bags and disappeared, and no one would have blamed you. But you stayed. And you changed everything." "You changed everything," Maeve corrected. "You stood up for me when no one else would. Risked your reputation, your business relationships, everything. You showed me that I was worth fighting for. No one had ever done that before." "Then everyone before me was a fool." He kissed her softly. I'm the luckiest man alive, Maeve Strickland, and I intend to spend every day of the rest of our lives making sure you know it. They stood there together, watching the stars wheel overhead, and Maeve thought about the strange path that had brought her here, the broken engagement that had driven her from Boston, the loneliness that had nearly consumed her in Red Creek, the frightened little girl crying behind a bookshelf, and the grieving father who'd burst through the door looking for her. All of it had been necessary. All of it had led to this. Standing on a veranda with her husband beside her and her daughter sleeping safely upstairs, part of a family she'd found by accident and claimed with fierce intention. The schoolhouse would be waiting Monday morning. 25 students now, with 3 more enrolling after the new year. The school board had approved funding for an assistant teacher and a proper library. Father Rodriguez was organizing a community reading program. Clara Patterson had volunteered to teach sewing on Saturday afternoons. Red Creek was changing, growing, becoming the kind of place where a woman could speak her mind and not be destroyed for it, where a grieving widower could find love again without apology, where a lonely child could have 2 mothers, one who'd given her life, one who'd given her hope, and feel blessed by both. It wasn't perfect. There would be challenges ahead, money troubles and harsh winters and all the small difficulties that came with building a life together. But they would face them as a family, and that made all the difference. Caleb's hand found hers in the darkness, their rings clicking softly together. "Ready to come inside?" he asked. "It's getting cold." Maeve looked at the warm light spilling from the windows, heard Maria humming in the kitchen as she cleaned up, saw Rosie's bedroom window where their daughter slept safely. "Yes," she said, "let's go home." They walked inside together, closing the door on the cold December night and stepping into warmth and light in the future they'd built from broken pieces and stubborn hope. The house that had been a mausoleum was alive again, with laughter and love and the daily miracles of family. And in the morning, they would wake up together and begin again. 3 people who'd found each other in the darkness and decided to make their own light. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.